All alone, there's no one here beside me. My troubles have all gone. Around me, but you gotta have friends. So welcome to the Mbadika X Autodesk Tinkercad webinar for us to tinker together. I'm just having a quick sip of water, but like I always say, we always start 10 minutes after the hour for you to get straight and get your materials ready. So the materials you're gonna need for this webinar, for this afternoon session, is gonna be paper, of course, some kind of writing utensil like a pen, colored pencil, Crayola crayon, colored marker, whatever you can get your hands on to write with. And last but not least, a ruler. In terms of software you're going to need, yesterday we dabbled in Fusion 360. We're going to go back to our tried and true Autodesk Tinkercad. So make sure you're logged into your Tinkercad account. If you don't have a Tinkercad account, don't worry. Just go ahead and go to Tinkercad, Tinkercad.com, and go ahead and create the account. And we're going to get started in a couple of minutes just to get everyone a little bit of time to get on the same page. And yes, I'm gonna stop humming so you guys don't hear all of that while we're giving everyone a little bit of time to come into the live stream. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to pose them to me in the Q&A part of the Zoom webinar. If you're joining us, because this is a recording, don't worry about it. Just use this time to go gather your material. Hello. We have a person, wait on a person, no idea what's happening. So if you're just joining us, I'm gonna go ahead and add it onto the chat. So we're just waiting a couple of minutes. We always start 10 minutes after the hour because sometimes we have new people joining us trying to navigate the actual Zoom webinar interface. So what I'm going to ask for you all to do, if you haven't already, and I'm going to also add it into the chat section, go ahead and grab a piece of paper or writing utensil such as a pen, pencil, marker, color pencil, etc., as well as a ruler, because you're going to need that bad boy today. And last but not least, I know yesterday for our webinar, we dabbled in Autodesk Fusion 360. If you don't know what that is totally fine. But today we're going to be dabbling in Autodesk Tinkercad. If you don't already have a Tinkercad account, feel free to go ahead and log in. You're going to Tinkercad, K-E-R-C-A-D. Sorry, just had a little floaty in my eye. So you're going to Tinkercad.com in order to create an account so we can follow along together for our activity today. So we still have another 6 minutes as we wait for people to come into this actual webinar. So feel free to grab those materials and then get ready to tinker together. And I'm just going to be answering questions in the meantime. So if you have a question before we get started, go ahead and use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom webinar bar. So that way you can ask me questions and I can answer them before we get started. I don't know why this song stuck in my head, and I do apologize. If you have me up in your headphones or you have me on speaker, you're gonna have random humming that's gonna be happening. So don't fret on that. If you don't have a Tinkercad account, you can create one. It's free. Perfect. So if you see the chat box, it should be delivering to you all the actual instructions and materials that you need to actually join us for this Mbadika and Autodesk Tinkercad present Tinkercad, oh my God, Tinker Together webinar. How I notice this happens every time we come from our break from the morning session, that once I have my lunch, I get so tongue-tied. So I'm gonna also apologize for that. But we're not going to let that hamper us from having a good time tinkering together this afternoon. So if you have any questions, once again, we're wrapping up and we're in the last 3 minutes before we actually get started with creating our project for today. And remember, this is the afternoon session. You don't have to have any previous knowledge to jump into this webinar. We're going to be starting almost from scratch in regards to the project we're working on today, just to give you a feel for some cool things you can do in Tinkercad. And I'm going to say this here. This is your first time ever using Tinkercad, don't sweat, don't fret. We like to do these webinars at 2 different levels. The basic level is if you want to strictly follow me and what I'm doing, and I'm going to give you a bunch of tips and tricks on how I navigate the Tinkercad software to bring my ideas to life. If you already feel comfortable with Tinkercad and you're just looking for some project ideas and activities to do that uses the Tinkercad software, or you just want to hang out with us and tinker together, I'm going to give you additional tasks while I'm going the regular course so you can start pushing yourself to developing and advancing your Tinkercad skills. Sometimes in this webinar, we like to do 3D designs in Tinkercad. Sometimes we do circuits, but for right now, for today, we're going to strictly be in the 3D design environment, learning some tips and tricks on balancing our CAD models for use for 3D printing, as well as setting them out for laser cutting or using them for 2D design. So today is going to be about 2D design and 3D design, the difference between them, and how to utilize Tinkercad to bring our ideas to life, whichever design option we decide to choose. So going ahead, we got 2.5 minutes left. So go ahead and get those materials, make sure you're straight. And when you're straight, go ahead and raise your hand so I know you're with us. And just as a side note, I saw someone ask the question about, can you see us? No, with this Zoom webinar format, I can't actually see you. In terms of enabling chat, you can't talk to me in the chat feature. I can only send you a message. However, if you want to talk to me, then you have to use the Q&A section, like I see some of you already have done. And this again is another thing we're doing in order to protect your privacy and to make sure that we can protect your personal information and your business and keep it as personal and tied to you as possible. I don't need to know all about your life. I just need to know how I can help you as we tinker together here. So rounding about our last minute, I am going to check if there's any additional questions on our social media. So I have my trusty phone here. And it looks like everyone's raising their hands. We have one more person to get some stuff straight. And because the way I like to teach, whether I'm teaching digitally or in person, I like to make every la 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 la. You see what I mean by the tongue-tiedness? I like to make sure everyone is following along with us and no one feels like they're being left behind. So you're going to see me making sure that everything's hunky-dory. I'm going to ask you constantly to raise your hand to make sure you follow along with the step. No one else should be seeing your hand raised. Nobody else should be seeing your questions unless I make them public, just so everyone knows what was the question asked. So don't worry, never fear. I'm going to put my last bit on because I like to also hear the sounds on my computer hitting me from side to side. So I got my goggles set up and I got my headphones set up. And I'm gonna ask you guys a quick question just to test out the Q&A feature, because I see some of you guys got your hands raised, so thank you for listening to instructions. My first question for you all, and I want you to send it to me via the Q&A section of this webinar chat feature, is to tell me your comfort level with Tinkercad. So I see a couple of people who joined us earlier this week. I want to see everyone's skill level. So tell me if you feel very comfortable, somewhat comfortable, or you're a first timer when it comes to using Tinkercad. So just let me know in the Q&A so I can make sure A, that's working for everyone, and B, kind of get a feel for the folks who are here, what is your skill level, so I can adjust accordingly and as needed. So I see a couple people chiming in with their Q&A parts. I would like to see a couple of more just so I get a feel. And yes, you're probably already going, we're not even 15 minutes yet, and this is so interactive. Yes. One of my pet peeves when it comes to webinars is that a lot of times when you're doing virtual learning, it's almost like you're in a lecture hall and the professor's yelling at you and not really engaging or interacting with you. So I'm gonna ask you to interact a lot. Don't be afraid and don't be shy. Just feel free to use that Q&A section so I can know. Okay, so we got some people very comfortable. I got one or two who are saying they're somewhat comfortable. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys one more minute and then we're gonna get started. But just make sure you have the materials needed. You have paper, you have a writing utensil such as a pen, pencil, a marker, a crayon, whatever you got at home. That's what I need you to use. And also I need you to have your ruler because we're gonna do some basic measurements today just to make sure that we're measuring to bring our ideas to reality. Because when we're in Tinkercad, sometimes we get kind of carried away about how something looks and we don't actually take the time to make sure that the model we're creating is actually realistic. So today we're going to be practicing some real life measurements to make sure what we're making in Tinkercad, whether it's a 2D design or a 3D design, is as realistic as possible. Okay, I got people saying they're somewhat comfortable, a little comfortable. Okay, we don't have too many, it looks like, newbies who are to the Tinkercad software. So some basic stuff I can see that you guys should already be able to handle. So let's get started. So earlier this week, just to review what we did previously, we did a couple of Tinkercad projects that were inspired by something I've been finding a lot of great comfort with. So the past couple of weeks that we've been at a stay-at-home order here in Boston, which is what I call home, and that's where Mbadika is headquartered, which is the name of my organization, which we do this kind of stuff all the time, not necessarily virtually all the time, but we do it in a way virtually through our YouTube channel in which we create project videos and hands-on workshops. So here in Boston, we've been at a stay-at-place order for a while. And one of the things I really have come to appreciate is this little corner of the YouTube universe, which is the Korean home cafes. If you don't know what I mean, just Google Korean home cafes on YouTube and you'll understand what I'm talking about. They're the most peaceful and relaxing videos that I've encountered. And I'm a huge ASMR fan when it comes to tiny kitchen cooking or hearing like wrapper sounds. I know some people don't find it's their thing, but for me, it's very relaxing because I find when I get deep into a project, I get very stressed out very quickly. And I find it's something that kind of brings my anxiety down a couple levels. Excuse me. So one of the things that I find with the Korean home cafes is that they have amazing projects they do at home in order to bring that sophistication, that flair, and that grace to simple coffee beverages. If you've ever been to a Starbucks or a Teavana, you'll notice that a simple caramel frappuccino tastes completely different when they make it versus when you make it at home. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate with those Korean home cafe videos. They show you almost step by step how they bring those cute beverages to life, whether it's strawberry in a clear ice cube or ice sphere, how they can put edible flowers in them, how they can make chocolate molds in order to have a teddy bear chocolate to add to a cup of hot cocoa. And they always have it in these cute cups. So one of the things we did earlier this week utilizing Tinkercad was that we actually created our own cup. So you'll see here. So we actually used Tinkercad in order to create a little strawberry cup container that was inspired by those Korean home cafes. And so yesterday we took it up a notch for day 2, and we actually utilized the Fusion 360 plugin that you can find in Tinkercad. I'm going to showcase that again today, but whenever you want to take your 3D designs you make in Tinkercad up a notch, you can use that Autodesk Fusion 360 plugin to have it be rendered, which is an environment that allows for you to apply realistic materials and textures and colors in order to make your project stand out from this to something you can see actually in a presentation or closer to something you would see on a store shelf. So that's what we did the first 2 days. Today, what I would like for us to do is on our Tinkercad dashboard, I want us to go to create new design. And I want us to do something because I don't know what part of the country or the world you're from, but here in the United States, Wednesday is also known as hump day because it's the biggest hump you have to get through in order to get to Friday. Now, one of my actual classmates from back in the day made the joke that given the fact that a lot of us are in a stay-in-place order, hump day doesn't seem as significant as it used to be because it seems almost every day is Friday unless you have to work from home or you have a lot of schoolwork. And even then, it seems like the weekend has almost lost some meaning. But who cares about that? We're still going to celebrate that it's the middle of the week because it's Wednesday. So let's go ahead and get started making our project. The first thing we're going to do is change the title. The reason why I harp on this is because if you saw my dashboard, there are dozens, if not hundreds of Tinkercad models there. And the reason why is because I've been using Tinkercad for almost 5 years. And so I teach in Tinkercad, I model for clients in Tinkercad, I showcase Tinkercad models on our YouTube channel. So I use a lot of Tinkercad models, and if I do not label my models correctly and allow for them to all have these random names, it takes me so much longer to go through my dashboard and to find my CAD models. So what I'm going to do is change the title and go Mbadika X, because I'm partnering with Tinkercad on this. I'm going to call it Tinkercad, and then I'm going to use a little straight line and go Tinker together. Da-da-da. Day 3. So now I have my title up here. I'm going to get started on my work plane. So since most people here are comfortable with Tinkercad, I'm just going to give a very brief overview of this work plane. This is your work surface for you to actually create your models to life. And we're just going to get started in 1 second, creating our first project. So I always like to do a warm-up activity, and one of my favorite warm-up activities is trying to turn something that we recognize in real life and trying to brainstorm around how could we make that in the Tinkercad environment. For those who are unfamiliar, if you look over onto your right-hand side, you see a bunch of basic shapes, right? You see a box, you see a cylinder, you see a sphere, roof, cone. These are all basic shapes that you can bring onto your work plane, and you can manipulate or change to turn to whatever shape that you really want to actually have. So what we're going to do today, this is your challenge. So one of the activities we did with the morning group was that we decided to create a celebratory cupcake topper. Now, what's a celebratory cupcake topper? So if you've ever had like a class party or a birthday party and you've gotten cupcakes from the supermarket, or you had that one friend or you went to a bakery that was really into decorating cupcakes, you've probably seen them create those little things that stick up on the top of cupcakes. And let me see if it actually wants to show itself and be nice today. So this is one example of our cupcake topper here. It's just something you put on top of the cupcake to make it look razzle-dazzle and make it look fancy. I'm a huge fan. Oh, yeah, there we go. I'm a huge fan of cupcake toppers. I think they add a little bit of spunk and a little bit of personality to cupcakes, especially when you want to brand or have a theme. I'm going to say something. I don't need to hear it in the Q&A part, but I'm going to say something honest. I am not a fan of sprinkles. I hate them. I hate sprinkles. I know that's a controversial opinion to some people. I don't think decorating something with sprinkles, unless it's colored glitter or edible glitter, can qualify as decoration. And I hate when people bring me cupcakes or cake and they call it decorated because they put sprinkles on it. Yes, this is my mini rant about sprinkles. So I love cupcake toppers because you can add personality without giving me sprinkles. And so one of the reasons why we designed this project in the morning session earlier last week is because I thought it would be a cool thing in order to explore a couple of the basic features in Tinkercad. Today, I want us to take it up a notch. Since I got so much positive feedback around this cupcake, I thought in the afternoon session, since we're supposed to be doing more advanced projects, we could take this cupcake up a couple levels or go bam and kick it up a notch. So here you can see what we did in the morning session. It's a basic cupcake. I used one of the basic shapes over here and I manipulated or changed it in order to make it look more like a cupcake when it first comes out of a muffin tin. I made a very, let's call it abstract version of icing in order to have it on top of our cupcake. And then you see my cupcake topper. What I would like for us to do today as our warm up for the afternoon session is, instead of taking the entire session to create this, I want us to quickly make a cupcake and icing that we see fit, I don't know what accent that was, from our basic shapes toolbar on the right-hand side. If you want to follow along on how I will make it, I'll give you tips and tricks on how I made this cupcake. If you want to take this time and do this by yourself in order to warm up your Tinkercad muscles, feel free. If you have any questions, go ahead and feel free to shoot me a Q&A if you come up into any bumps in the road as you're bringing your cupcake to life. So the first project we're going to do is creating a cupcake in our work plane. So when I'm making a cupcake, I like to look at my basic shapes and I like to think, what shape reminds me of a cupcake? When I think about a cupcake is usually like a cylinder, but it has some like rounded sides. So I'm going to look over here at my cylinder side, and let me go ahead and change my mouse and add a little spotlight to it, because I want to make sure that the light is on. So I'm going to click my cylinder and bring it over. When I click my cylinder and bring it over, it should materialize. I don't like this orange color. It seems like you put too much fruit dye in it. So I'm going to choose a more demure color to be closer to what I think is a cupcake yellow, because I love baking with yellow cake. I know that's also a controversial opinion, but let's go yellow cake. If you want to customize your color even further, here's a tip. Go ahead to the custom part of your colors, and you can actually go in and actually slowly adjust the color by moving around your color wheel. If you're very familiar with hex codes, which are basically color codes, you can actually input the color code you want right over here in this bracket there, in order to add your own custom color if something doesn't suit your fancy. I'm gonna go a little lighter because I want it to look like it's freshly baked. It seems like I keep getting it to the brown, so I'm gonna play with this outer wheel a little bit until I feel like I've gotten close to what it should look like coming out the oven. And also, most of the time when I'm making cupcakes, the first batch I always find a way to burn because I get too confident that they look pretty through like that oven window. And then I decide to multitask and do something else. And then the next couple of minutes, I start smelling them and they look this color. But this is what my ideal cupcake color is gonna look like. So now that I have my cupcake color and my object is selected, I wanna zoom in on that object. So what I'm gonna do is go over here to the fitted screen and zoom. And this is allowing me to have a zoomed in reality of my actual cylinder. So now I'm gonna move over to what also exists in my shape toolbar on the right-hand side. And I see something that's called sides. So I can increase the number of sides on my cylinder. And as you can tell, it's smoothing out the outside of my cylinder. So the more I adjust that dial, the more smoothness I'm seeing. Next up, I can bevel, which is basically making like a little round notch on the top and bottom. I can show you a view. So a trick here, if you want to see all the angles of your CAD model, you can go to your left-hand side to the upper cube, and you can adjust accordingly in order to see all the sides and all the angles of your actual CAD model. So you see here, I'm trying to see how much of a bevel that I want to add to my cupcake. And then I could go down here and add additional segments to make it not so drastic. So here I'm adding a couple more segments to smooth out the top and bottom of my cupcake, going to my left-hand cube and seeing that that kind of looks like what a cupcake should look like when it comes out of the muffin tin. And it even has a small little indent in the center, just like when the little air pockets in your little muffin or cupcake kind of pop and kind of make a little indent there. So now that I have this to my satisfaction, I now need to get my measurements. So take your ruler out. And I want you to have your ruler in front of you, and I want you to tell me, what do you think is the typical diameter of a cupcake? So this is when you use your mind and do something called a back of the envelope calculation. So a back of the envelope calculation is when you basically use a scrap piece of paper, whatever reference points, memories, or thoughts you have relating to the calculation, to make an educated guess about what is the actual measurement you're looking for. So for example, I have my ruler, I have my hand. With a show of hands, do we think a cupcake is larger or smaller than the size of my hand from here to here, or the width of my hand from my thumb to my actual pinky? Go ahead and let me know by raising your hand if you think, yes, a cupcake is larger than the width from my thumb to my pinky. Let me see by a show of hands. Yes, it's a trick question. See, I'm going to slowly start you up with the warm up. It's not going to be too intense off the first off. So yes, if you have a cupcake that is the width from your pinky to your thumb, I don't know if legally that could be considered a cupcake. I know there's some mega cupcakes that could be this big, but I wouldn't consider that a cupcake. So your typical cupcake, what do we call it? 3 inches, which is from here to here. Would we call it about 2 inches, 1 inch? Go ahead in the Q&A section and let me know your guess of what you think is the typical width of a cupcake. Feel free to use other objects around you that you think is closer in size. If you want to run to the kitchen and grab a muffin tin if you have it, or you have cupcake liners and you want to measure it in order to see what the actual width of a standard cupcake is, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to do so. So send me your answers in the Q&A part so I can actually see what we think is the average width of a cupcake. No, I'm not going to do that because that's the Jeopardy theme song. But go ahead and add that to the Q&A part so I can kind of see where your guesses is. And then I'll tell you the actual answer. Now, again, this is for a standard US cupcake. That does not mean that if you're in, let's say, Paris, that the cupcake width is not going to be different. And not just width, but we can even say the diameter, which is the distance across a cupcake because it's a cylinder. So the length and the width are exactly the same. What is the actual standard? I don't know. Diameter or width of a cupcake in Paris? I don't know. But I could tell you the one in the US. So do 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 do. So go ahead and add it to the Q&A part. I see one person saying 1.5 inches. Do we have any other guesses on what the standard width of a cupcake is? So we have 1.5 inches. I see 2 inches. Wow, okay, I see a lot of 2 inches. I see someone who said it is the width of your hand. Maybe I just have big hands, who knows? But I don't measure it for me. That's why you have a ruler, measure it. Okay, so 1.5 inches, 2 inches. I'm gonna give you guys a couple of more seconds to give me some more guesses in the Q&A part. What is the width of a cupcake? Feel free to use a muffin pan, measure some cupcake liners, or just use an educated guess by scribbling some notes down and measure some things you think is close in diameter or width and length of your actual cupcake. So go ahead and send that to me in the Q&A. Someone's asked for some more time. I can give you about another 30, 45 seconds in order to figure this part out. This is to warm your brain up, so not just answering questions, but also getting you active and realizing that a lot of times, yes, Google is amazing. You can always Google the answer, but you can also use things around you in order to take an educated guess, and you'll be surprised how much stuff you know that you don't really think you know. So given a couple of more seconds for some guesses about what we think the width, length, or diameter, since it is a circle, of a standard cupcake. And I'm saying a standard US cupcake. So the ones you see on food channels, you see on blogs and social media. What do we think is the actual width, length, and diameter of a standard cupcake? I'm going to give 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. For what I've been able to tally, it seems like we have a majority of folks are saying 2 inches. We have some folks saying 1.5 inches. I have a couple 3 inches, and I know I asked this question earlier in the week, but I actually got an official answer from somebody after the chat that the official diameter or width and length of a cupcake in the United States, a standard cupcake, is 3 inches. So 3 inches is actually the standard diameter. If you are getting a mini cupcake, which are the ones that you can like unwrap and pop in your mouth and eat in one gulp, those are 1.5 inches. So 3 inches is diameter for a typical cupcake, and 1.5 inches is diameter for a mini cupcake. So if we go back to our Tinkercad screen, we now know that our actual Tinkercad cupcake needs to be 3 inches in diameter. But if you're new to Tinkercad, you may notice something. This looks like it's nowhere near 3 inches or 2 inches. And why is it 20? Like, this is obviously not 20 inches. One of the things you always have to make sure you do, and let me put my spotlight back on just to make sure everyone can follow along, is that you always need to double check your grid down here. So we're going to go to Edit Grid, and we realize that our actual work plane is in millimeters. So we're going to go ahead and change from millimeters to inches. If you're more comfortable with millimeters, go right ahead. I'm going to leave you to the conversion of it, but we're going to work in inches because we're based in the United States, and inches is something we deal with everyday life, and it's something we're more comfortable with if we're doing mathematics or any kind of engineering problems in the US. If we were doing work internationally, we will lean towards millimeters. I personally prefer millimeters, but when I'm teaching, I use inches. We'll also see here that we have the width and length of our planes. So I like my work plane to mimic my ruler. So I can either make it 12 inches by 12 inches, or if I know that it's not going to be this much space I need, I go ahead and I shrink it down to 10 inches by 10 inches. I never do smaller than that unless I specifically need it for some kind of purpose. So here I'm going to make it 10 inches wide, and I'm going to make it 10 inches long. And I'm going to go ahead and update my grid. Once I update, I'm going to go to my left-hand side and click the home button and zoom out. And I can see that now my actual cupcake is 0.787 inches by 0.787 inches. So I'm going to go ahead, click the lower white square, click the number, and I'm going to change that number to be 3 inches in width. And then I'm going to tab, using my key as a cheat, 3 inches in length in order to make my cupcake. Now, we're going to pull out our ruler once again, and we're going to see with our ruler that if our cupcake is 3 inches, which means it hits right here, it's about this big, which I think is a decent width for a cupcake. Now, the height of our cupcake we know isn't this big. So I think it's a fair, educated guess that our height of our cupcake is maybe 1.5 inches. So that's the height I'm going to make for my cupcake. So here, I'm going to make it 1.5 inches is the cupcake. So now we click the home button that allows us to zoom out. Whoop. And when we zoom out, it allows us to look at it. And that, if we're looking at a cupcake on a work plane that's 10 inches by 10 inches, I would say that kind of makes sense for the cupcake to take up that much space on our work plane. So I'm going to zoom back into my cupcake. I'm going to change my camera angle using my cube on the left-hand side, and it looks like I'm okay with this being the body of my cupcake. And so the next thing I want to do is I actually want to create a top for my cupcake. So in order to make a top for my cupcake, I need to go ahead and look at my basic shapes, for example. To look at my basic shapes, I'm going to click off, if the software allows me to. Awesome. And then I'm going to look over onto the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, I see numerous candidates that could be used to actually be my cupcake topper. If you saw my previous cupcake topper that we did for what I made was an Avengers-inspired cupcake topper, the actual shape that I used, if you scroll all the way down, was the diamond basic shape at the suggestion of one of our webinar participants. So I'm going to use that shape once again because I really liked how it looked. If you want some suggestions on how to make your cupcake icing top, feel free to use a paraboloid, which is really good for creating that top shape. You can also look and try to see if you want to use a cone in order to create your shape. I've seen some people actually make a torus ring and make multiple torus rings going up. Matter of fact, raise your hand if you think I should challenge myself a little bit, and instead of doing the diamond one, do the torus run. So let me see hands raised if you think I should use the torus in order to actually make the icing on top of the cupcake. Okay. I see torus automatically wins. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I know that my cupcake is 3 inches by 3 inches in terms of the width and the length. So what I'm going to do is bring my torus over. And my first torus is not going to be 3 inches by 3 inches, right? As I can see, it's 1 inch by 1 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and click the lower white square. And I'm going to make my first torus ring 3 inches by 3 inches. And let's see what it looks like. Perfect. So now I'm going to change my camera angle to see what it looks like from the side. And it looks like it's a very decent layer. Let's see the height. So the height, if you can tell, is 1/4 of an inch or 0.25 inches. In order to get my torus ring on top of my actual cupcake, I'm going to have to use this black triangle, and I'm going to have to raise this black triangle the height of my actual cupcake. And remember, we said the height of the cupcake is 1.5 inches. So here, I'm going to go ahead and click. And instead of it being 1/8 of an inch or 1.125, 1.125 blah, 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 inches, I'm going to make it off the work plane 1.5 inches. And so you can see here that if I move it up, it should glide right over my cupcake. But I want to make sure that my first torus ring is perfectly aligned with my cupcake. So what I'm going to do is actually select multiple objects. In order to do this, I can click over off my 2 subjects or my 2 actual objects, drag my mouse over those 2 objects, go over to my right-hand side, and you'll see something called the Align tool. If you want to use your keyboard, go ahead and click the L key on your keyboard in order to align. And this bad boy should pop up. When you see your Align tool, you can align down the middle. You can also align down the center. Now, let's say you don't want to align down the center. What I love about the Align tool is you can you can see your future if you decide to select this tool. I'm pretty confident that I don't want my icing kind of leaning towards the front in one way, kind of leaning towards the back another way. So I'm going to have it aligned straight down the center. Now I'm going to change my camera angle again to see how it looks. I don't know. I want this torus ring to be a little taller. So what I'm going to do is just increase the height just a tad because I want some oomph with each one. So now that I have my first ring, it's time for me to actually create my second ring. So what I'm going to do for my second ring is I'm going to go over to the left-hand side and I'm going to click duplicate and repeat. So I'm going to duplicate my actual, I said duplicate, Lord, that's what you call the repeat of something. I'm actually going to duplicate my actual torus and I'm going to tilt it this way and I'm going to raise it up. What was the height of our torus ring again? I think we made the height of our torus ring. What do we make the height of our torus ring? Does anyone remember? Help me, I'm old. No. I think, yes, we made it 1/4 of an inch. So the way I'm going to raise it from the work plane is that the first one was 1.5 inches. I'm going to add 1/4 of an inch to it to make it 1.75. So 1.75 inches off. So just to make sure you can keep track, I'm actually going to add that text here. So the first torus is 1.5 inches from the work plane. The first torus thickness is 0.25 inches, right? So if we want to make sure our second torus is on top of the first torus, we have to add 1.5 inches plus 0.25 inches, which equals 1.75 inches. And don't forget that the inch indicator is these 2 actual quotation marks. If you wanted to indicate a foot, it's just 1 quotation mark, which is why we have it shown this way. So that's how we know that we're supposed to be 1.75 inches off of our work plane. Now it's time for us to do the third one. So we know our second torus is 1.75 inches from the work plane. If our second torus's thickness is if our second torus's thickness is 0.25, then how far off the work plane is our third torus? Go ahead and answer that question in the Q&A section, just to make sure you guys understand my math and to make sure you're learning a valuable skill when it comes to design. So I'm going to give you guys a minute. If the second torus is 1.75 inches from the work plane and the thickness of the second torus is 0.25 inches, how far off the work plane must the third torus be to glide on top of it? If you need a reference, go ahead and check how I did the previous equation. And I'm going ahead and add the second torus thickness is 0.25 inches. So what is the actual height or distance from the work plane the third torus must be? And don't forget, the torus is these shapes right here. Oh, I see some questions coming in. Well, I see some answers coming in. Take your time. I'm going to be slowly doing it just to provide a little bit more context. That's going to be 1.75 inches plus 0.25 inches, which equals, yep, I see a couple people with the right answer. It is 2 inches. So when we select this command, we're going to click the top torus. We're going to click duplicate and repeat, and we're going to raise it up from the actual work plane. You see how this popped up? 2 inches. So we already have all of the shapes of our toruses. Do you think we should add 2 more torus levels? Raise your hand if you want to have a swirl of icing on top. That's 5 toruses versus the 3 we have right now. And I'm going to show you how you can manipulate this in order to make it look like a cone. Okay, I got it. So I'm going to duplicate and repeat. And every time I repeat, you notice that now it knows we're moving it 0.25 inches. It's automatically doing that. Let me show you again. The reason you use the duplicate and repeat tool is once you tell Tinkercad what you're doing with that shape, and what Tinkercad is noticing is that every time we add a torus on top of each other, we're adding the new one at another height of 0.25 inches from this work plane. So the next time we do duplicate and repeat, it actually knows what we're doing. Since I undid, I have to do it again. So let's see if I can showcase this time. So I've moved it 0.25 inches. And when I repeat and I click here to move it, it's showing it went from 2.25 inches to 2.5 inches. So this is a neat trick that you can actually use in Tinkercad, that once you tell Tinkercad how you want shapes to stack up, all you have to do is click this duplicate and repeat tool or Control D on your keyboard in order to have it repeat. Now, when we look at cupcake icing, does it look like a stack of donuts most times? No, it doesn't look like a stack of donuts. So we need to figure out how we're gonna have each torus layer be smaller than the other in order to create a cone shape that looks more like a paraboloid like here, or looks more like this cone right here. So that means every time we add a torus layer, we need to add 1 layer, make another layer have a smaller width, another layer have a smaller width, another layer have a smaller width, until we get an icing cone that looks like this, with our regular torus on the bottom and then our small torus on the top. So I'm going to show you how I do it, and then I want to see what you guys actually come up with on your own. So let's go ahead and go back into our Tinkercad environment, and I'm going to start off with this here. The base one, we already know that the width and length is 3 inches. So my game plan is, since I have 5 layers, I'm going to knock off about 0.5 inches from each layer. Now, let's see what I do with layer 2. So I just said I'm going to knock off 0.5 inches. So that's going to make this, the length be 2.5 inches and the width be 2.5 inches. So that's going to be different. Now I'm going to move on to layer 3. I'm going to knock off another 0.5 inches. So this is going to be 2 inches, and this is going to be 2 inches. And now I'm going to knock off another layer. And so because this one is another layer above, I'm going to make this 1.5 inches, and this one 1.5 inches. And then this top one, I'm just going to make 1 inch. So it's going to be 1 inch by 1 inch. Just like it was before. Now, if I look at my cupcake, it kind of seems like it's slanting towards the left. So what I'm going to do is click and drag over all of my shapes in order to align it. I'm going to go over to my align tool, or press the L on my keyboard, and I'm going to align it down the center, and boom. And I'm going to line it down the center on that side. And what do you know? We actually have our little squiggly top. So now it looks like we just had a little bloop of actual icing placed on top. I don't like this right here. I want to make a really tight, Actually, I'm gonna bring a sphere here, and I'm gonna make the sphere 0.5 inches by 0.5 inches just to top off my cupcake. And the last height we left with, when you're dealing with the sphere, you have to make sure the length, width, and height are covered. So I have to make sure all of it is 0.5 inches. If I do a front view, I know the latest height of my torus was 2.5 inches. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna raise this 2.75 inches. So 2.75 inches. And I'm gonna align again. So I'm gonna select all of this here and drag over. Oops, it didn't select. If you are trying to select something and it's a little hard to drag over, don't forget to press down the Shift key on your keyboard and select that object. If you want to double check you have all your objects selected, just go ahead and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 shapes should be selected. I go over to my shape toolbar. I see the number 7, so I know I'm good. I'm going to go back to my align tool, and you're going to notice a lot of things in Tinkercad is just aligning. And you see I'm aligning once more. You see I'm aligned down the center and I'm aligned there. And if we look at the front view, you see all that glory. And I just topped off my little thing. Let's look at it from the top. That looks pretty hunky-dory to me. My circle here is floating a little bit, so I'm gonna probably lower it just a tad, but that's just because I'm being a stickler. You don't have to do this. This is just me being Nisha. I'm gonna lower it just a bit. There we go. Lower it just a bit because I want it to fit snugly inside of there. So now that I have all these aligned, I don't want my icing to just be one color. So I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna make sure each color is a different, each layer is a different color. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna change the color here, and I'm gonna go to my preset so I can have a built-in rainbow. I'm gonna start off with pink. Actually, let me start the bottom layer off with pink. I'm going to start the bottom layer off with pink. I'm going to make the second layer purple. So going back, and I'm just going down this horizontal row here for colors. And now that I've got pink and I got purple, I'm going to do a dark blue. I'm going to go here and go and make this a light teal right here. And then here, I'm going to make this even a darker teal, almost like a tie-dye effect. And then for my last part, the little bloop, I'm gonna do this here. Actually, I want something a little bolder than that. I'm gonna do green. Actually, you know what? This is when you have Nisha being a stickler. You don't have to follow this. This is Nisha just trying to make her cupcake stand out a little bit more. I'm gonna make it leap just a tad bit more so we have this kind of color gradient. And so there we have it. We have our little cupcake. If you want to add a little more pizzazz to this cupcake, I'm going to show you. So here we have the toruses layered, almost like it's stacked together, like you did bloop, 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 bloop. What I'm going to do is have everything come at a little bit of an angle. So it seems more you did like a multicolored swirl for your actual cupcake topper. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So let's go back into Tinkercad. And let's do that. So here, I'm gonna actually tilt the cupcake, and I'm gonna start with the bottom with here. And so you'll see this little double arrow. You see that little fake double arrow there? What I'm gonna do is pull up, and I'm gonna slightly tilt about 5 degrees. You don't want it too dramatic, but you want it a little bit dramatic. Next up, I'm gonna do the second layer here, and I'm gonna also make it tilt just ever so slightly with that double arrow. So if you don't see the numbers, feel free to just zoom out a little bit to make sure. I'm gonna actually undo that because I wanted to make sure that it was perfect. And so I'm gonna do this part right here. So now I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna make it 5 degrees. Just to tilt. And then I'm gonna do it for each layer just to give it a little bit of that curve. So you don't have to be like overly dramatic with your curves. You can be just a little slight hint that it's giving a little side curl to it, like that. And you see how I'm gonna make this about 3 degrees, just so we're getting a balancing act together. And then this one, I'm gonna make slightly less. Whoop, that's not what I wanted to do. See, this is what happens when you do things live. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. If you wanna adjust the layers, you can do so. I'm gonna adjust this bottom one just slightly. So a little bit of it actually, like it was in the cupcake. And so this looks more like what a realistic cupcake would look like. If you want to expand the top or do anything like crazy, go right ahead to make your cupcake look more realistic. But this is how I do my cupcake. I know some people are commenting that they would actually prefer having a cone at the top of a cupcake, so it's like a very sharp peak. I like to use a round tip when I'm icing, so that's the one I'm replicating. But once you're done with your actual cupcake, go ahead, and I would prefer if you just save the icing as one group. So the way you do that is select all things, hold the shift key, unselect the main cupcake body, go over to your right-hand side and group using the Control-G feature. And oh no, all of our hard work making that swirl for the cupcake just went out the window because it became the same color. So what we have to do is go into the toolbar and select multicolor to make sure we can keep our unique colors in play. Once we actually keep our unique colors in play, we should be okay. And we have our main cupcake body. If you want to be crazy and you want to create a cupcake wrapper, feel free to be my guest. But what you have here is a good enough cupcake. So we have our icing and we have our cupcake body. What we're going to do for this next part is select both of those and group them together. Now, I want to see a show of hands because we just showed a lot. I want to see you raise your hand if you have your cupcake and your Tinkercad work plane. If you need me to go over any part of the actual Tinkercad process, feel free to let me know because we're going to move on to the next part of our actual design of this cupcake. And this is the part that allows us to turn our 3D design or a 3D model of a cupcake into a 2D model of a cupcake. So raise your hand and let me know if you have any questions before we move forward. Okay, I see a lot of people raising their hands. It seems like everyone's hunky-dory. Okay, so we have our rainbow cupcake, right? I actually have a change of heart, and I'm gonna quickly ungroup for a second because I just wanna change this top part. I really think it may look cute. Yes, it looks really cute with that. So you can keep it rainbow. I just had a change of heart, and I wanna keep it looking the way I originally had envisioned it, and I'm gonna group this together. So it's gonna act as one. Hopefully, oh, no, that's not what I wanted. Gotta go back, follow my own rule, keep it multicolored. I wanted to still have a distinctive cupcake body and an icing top. So now that I have my cupcake grouped together, I have this huge work plane, right? So remember when I showed you earlier how to actually change the dimensions in your grid? This is gonna come into play right now. So one of the cool things with Tinkercad is that you can create 3D shapes and you can transform your 3D shapes into real life objects. The way you do this is you can export your Tinkercad models and send them to your 3D printer. I can send mine to my Dremel 3D20. Some people have MakerBots and Ultimakers. But if you don't have a 3D printer, there's still a way for you to bring to life your 3D designs. And that's by using 2D. So when we think about reality, I want everyone to hold up your piece of paper. So your piece of paper is an example of 2D. You have your length and you have your width. When we design in 3D, we also have to add into play a third dimension. Oh, wait, okay, a couple of people joined us. So hi, welcome to the Mbadika Tinkercad webinar, or the Tinker Together webinar. Right now, we just finished creating in Tinkercad a cupcake. If you missed that, no worries. All the recordings of our webinar will be on our YouTube channel. I'm gonna add that to the chat box in a couple of seconds. Right now, we're just transitioning from completing our 3D model of a cupcake in Tinkercad and how we're gonna bring it to life using 2D design. So everyone should have their piece of paper up and ready. So using your piece of paper, it's an example of 2D design because you have your length and you have your width. With your length and width, that is 2D because it's 2 dimensions you're measuring. So 2D, 2 dimensions you're measuring. When you're measuring with 3D, there's a third dimension, and that bad boy is height. So when you're looking at 3D designs, you're gonna have length, width, and height. If you have your ruler, go ahead and do that with me. You have length, width, and height. That's 3D or designing in 3 dimensions. We're gonna transform our 3D design of a cupcake into a 2D design, which means we're gonna get rid of the height, which is in our cupcake, and focus on the length and width. Now, you may be asking, how do we get rid of the height of our cupcake? Well, I'm glad you asked. We're actually gonna reassemble our 3D design of a cupcake by using various slices or 2D cuts of our 3D designed cupcake. And that's one of the clever tools you can use Tinkercad for. So most of the time, if you're familiar with Tinkercad, you're familiar with using your work plane as like your work surface. It's almost like your desktop or a desk or a table that you use in order to create your projects. That's what the work plane serves in Tinkercad most of the time. When we're trying to transform our 3D designs into 2D designs, we can use the work plane almost like a slicer. And one of the marvelous things that we can do is that we can actually create a 2D design into 3D. And I'm going to show you how. So if you're just joining us, I'm going to see if I can share my link in order to actually make my design public. If not, don't worry. I would suggest just bringing a regular cylinder into your Tinkercad work plane and just following along with us as we go through this process. So with a show of hands, raise your hand and let me know you're ready for us to move on. And while you do that, I'm going to get a drink of water because I think that's the reason I'm getting so tongue-tied right now. Welcome to a live webinar. I don't see hands raised, so go ahead and situate yourself. Make sure where you are in your actual Tinkercad design process, you're there. If you're just joining us, make sure you're logged into Tinkercad because that's what we're using to do this next step. Okay, someone just asked me for about 2 minutes. So I'm going to actually give you guys 3 minutes. So we're going to renew at the top of the hour. So in the next 3 minutes, go ahead and make sure your Tinkercad model is ready for us to transform into 2D. If you're just joining us, go ahead and log in, as you see in the chat box, to tinkercad.com and either create an account if you don't already have one, or log into your Tinkercad account if you do. And I'm just going to go ahead and answer a couple of questions while we wait to start in the next now 2 minutes. So, I hope that's not any music that I actually know in real life. So for those just joining us, my name is Nisha McCrae. I'm your mLab host, and I'm the one who will be leading all these Mbadika-Tinkercad webinars, which is our Tinker Together webinars. And so my background is engineering. One of my guilty pleasures is I love humming a lot. And I'm trying to get better about not humming when I'm doing webinars because I know, as you guys have told me plenty of times in the Q&A part, that sometimes when I'm humming and you're trying to focus on the project, it can be distracting. So I'm trying to do better, but you got to give me some slack because I'm not a young bird anymore. It takes a while for me to actually develop new habits. So you got to give me a little chance. So a couple of folks are asking for me to make this project public so you can actually edit the version that I have here. So while I'm waiting for everyone to get on the same page, I'm going to go ahead and do that. But please feel free to raise your hand if you're ready. So that way I can just keep track of who's ready for us to move on to the next step. And I see here. Okay. Okay, I'm making this public. So we're going to say Okay, you guys have about 30 more seconds before we get started. Okie dokie. I think we got this. So, if you want to know, we just made the actual CAD model for the Cupcake public. I'm going to go ahead and post that into the actual chat box so you guys have access to it. So if you want to look at the gallery and actually see where to access this actual cupcake, you have to give me a second. I don't move that fast while I'm trying to make this available. So you got to give me a moment, give me a moment. Okay. Okay. So is everyone ready? I'm missing some hands raised. Okay, let's get some more hands raised before we move on. Okay, I see a couple of more I want to wait on before we get started. Okay, it seems we're pretty good. So we're going to switch back into the Tinkercad environment. If you're just joining us, don't worry. You're going to see in the chat box appear very soon that I am making public the actual cupcake model I designed, so you can actually hop onto that. So give me 1 second, and we're going to jump back into Tinkercad. So let me share my screen, and let's go back into Tinkercad. So here is the cupcake model that we just made, and I've grouped my icing with my cupcake body to make it easier to move across my work plane. So as you see, my work plane is not going to have too many of these, right? So what I'm going to show you is how you can make a 2D design, which is basically a length and width design of your 3D design, and how we can turn that into something we can transform back into a 3D design. This is kind of my hack for you all to do when you don't have access to a 3D printer, or you just want to be able to manipulate something or try something new. So remember before I said that your work plane almost acts like a desktop? Well, here we're going to have our first cupcake here. Your work plane has a secret trick that can also do. Your work plane can actually cut through your 3D models and make slices. So here's an example. You can forgive how filthy it looks, but I've been playing with my nephews and nieces with this and making Play-Doh, what's the name of the character from Lego Movie 2? General Mayhem. I've been making Play-Doh General Mayhem wings with one of my cutters that I've made earlier on my 3D printer. If we look on the side of a 3D print, we notice that it prints in multiple layers, right? So if you look at the actual screen here, I'm gonna actually make it full screen. If you look at this 3D print here of my General Mayhem from Lego Movie 2 cookie cutter or Play-Doh cutter, that's why there's all these Play-Doh pieces in it. If we look on the side, we can actually see that the 3D printer prints it via straight lines. So the way a 3D printer works is like a regular printer. You basically have a design and it prints multiple layers until it comes up with the actual full design you want printed. So it's almost like it prints thousands of pieces of paper or thousands of 2D designs in order to make a 3D design. And that's how we get height. In Tinkercad, we can use our work plane in order to take slices, well, probably this way, take slices of our 3D model, and then we can use something like a printer, or we can actually use a printer in order to make a trace outline and stack up all those 2D slices in order to create a 3D design of our actual 3D design from Tinkercad. And don't worry if this is confusing, I'm going to show you what I mean. So if we go back into Tinkercad, my goal here is to actually slice up my cupcake into 1,000 layers of paper or 1,000 layers. Now, when I say 1,000 layers, I don't literally mean 1,000 layers. Today, I think we'll be safe if we actually do 12. The reason why we can get away with just doing 12 is that I'm gonna do 2D slices of my cupcake, and then I'm going to assemble it by printing a piece of paper with all my 2D slices, and I'm going to cut them out of cardboard and then stack them up to make a 3D slice. If you don't believe me, don't worry, just join me on this journey and just believe that this can happen. So first things first. So what I'm going to do is actually take my cupcake and I'm going to lower it into my work plane. This is something we wouldn't typically do when we're doing CAD modeling on Tinkercad, because you always want your work plane stuff to be on top of your work plane. Nobody wants their project to be through the table. But here, just bear with me, we want our work plane to act almost as a knife that's cutting a slice of our actual design. And to make sure it's cutting a slice, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep with our naming convention, and I'm going to make sure it's slicing the bottom 1/4 of an inch of our work plane. So if I show the fitted view and I show the front, you can see I made sure it's cutting a 1/4 of an inch. So now that we have it cutting a 1/4 of an inch, don't try to follow along here, just follow with me. I'm trying to make you all believers in creating your 3D design to 2D design to 3D design. You'll see here that I've cut this. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my cupcake and I'm going to move it about 3.5 inches, right? So you see me moving my cupcake, and on this cupcake, instead of it being cut by the work plane at the 0.25 inch mark, I'm going to cut it again another 25 inches. And then I'm going to do the same thing again. And you see how it already brought it down another 1/4 of an inch. So we can click here and it's already telling us that it's already 0.75 inches down. Well, it was, and then I messed it up. So I got to make it right. Yep, 0.75 inches. Now we see here, if I zoom in on this part with my fitted view, that it's already kind of overlapping here. I don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is nudge everybody over a little bit to make sure they're firmly in my work plane. Now, you may be wondering, well, why do you have 3 cupcakes aligned this way? I'm going to show you in a minute. And once again, don't panic, don't follow this part. I just want you to watch, because this is the fun part. So we're going to look here at the front, and you can tell that the 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and 0.75 inches of the work plane cutting through, right? Now, given our cylinder is a certain thickness, I don't expect the cross section, which is the part this is cutting, to be any different here, here, or here. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to continue doing this until I go all the way to the top. Again, you don't have to follow this part. I just want to show you a little bit of magic. So here, I'm going to do a little cheat, and I'm actually going to group this project, and I'm going to move it down. Ooh, I moved it too down. I moved her too down. No. I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to move her down about 3 inches, just so it's not touching the other cupcake. And to double check it's not touching the other cupcake, I'm going to do my top view. And what I'm going to do for these is I'm going to move these down individually. So here, I'm going to ungroup. And I'm going to move this down 1 inch. Going ahead here. And there's easier ways, but I just want to make sure you understand why I'm doing it a certain way. I'm going to move this bad boy down 1.25 inches. I'm going to move this one down 1.5 inches. Every time I'm moving it down, I'm moving it down 1/4 of an inch. So I'm adding a depth of 0.25 inches into my work plane every time I do this. And I'm going to repeat again. I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to move it down. And whew, looks like I'm almost out of space. Let me look at the top to make sure they're not touching. Whew, they're not touching. So I'm going to do the same thing. Here, it was 1.75 inches, I believe, was the last thing we did. So now we're up to 2 inches. This needs to go down. Oh, I forgot to put the negative. Remember, you got to put your negative in there because you're going into your work plane. So here is going to be negative 2.25, negative 2.25. Here is going to be negative 2.5. And you're just going to keep doing this until you actually go to down to the very tippity top. So if we do our front cross section, you can see that we're almost at the tippity top right there. We only have that little remainder that's right here. But we're probably going to have to leave this alone because if we look at the top view, we don't have any more space on our work plane. So we're going to leave this alone for now. I'm going to actually move these pieces up a little forward just so I can bring a couple of these other cross sections a little further down. Now, you're wondering, like, I don't see a cross section. All I see is various cupcakes at different heights. I told you, don't worry, just believe. Believe in what I'm about to show you. So here, I have my cross section all lined up. And what I'm going to do is use the export tool. So what the export tool would be typically used for is that I will select a cupcake that I want to bring to life using my 3D printer, and I would export it as an OBJ or an STL file. Those two file formats are the file formats for sending to your typical 3D printer or any kind of 3D printing design software. Since we're not 3D printing today, we're actually trying to do a 2D design and transform it into 3D design. We're going to use a different file format. The file format we're going to use today is called an SVG, which stands for Scaled Vector Graphic. A scaled vector graphic allows for you to actually have a shape that will withstand being manipulated or changed depending on the actual size. For example, you've probably taken pictures with like a cell phone or a really small camera, and then when you try to blow it up to become a full-size image for like your desktop or for a video or something of that matter, you see it's so pixelated. You've probably been seeing videos that probably looked fine on the camera or the phone that when you try to see it on your TV, you notice is really grainy or pixelated. That's because it's not a scaled vector, which means if you try to stretch out the image to fit the dimensions or the length or the width of the frame, it gets really grainy. When we work with SVG files or scaled vector graphic files, we don't have that concern. So that's what's going to give me confidence that the actual length and width of all of my little cuts here or my work plane cutting through different heights of my 3D design of a cupcake is going to work. So here I'm going to click at SVG, and you'll see here it says preparing model to export. So we're going to wait till it finishes exporting. And we should have a download, right? So when we have a download and we click it, we shouldn't really see anything unless you have certain design software. So I'm going to ask you all a question. With a show of hands, how many of you guys are familiar with Illustrator, Photoshop, or Inkscape? Raise your hand if you're familiar with those things. And wait. Raise your hand now. I forgot to lower hands from the last bit. So who's ever heard of Inkscape, Photoshop, Illustrator? You've probably heard of Photoshop even if you've never dealt with it, because Photoshop is what's used for photos to make them look gorgeous. They're used to correct people who have done magazine photo shoots or for models. I know my sister likes to always talk about Photoshop as what people use to make sure their pictures on Instagram always look amazing and blah, 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 blah. So what I'm going to actually show you today is a design software that is similar to Photoshop and similar to Illustrator. And this design software allows for us to look at our Tinkercad slices or the 2D design slices we just made. So I'm going to share that screen with you. The software that I'm using is Inkscape. Again, you don't have to do this. I'm just showing you something really neat that you can do with this. So you see I have a very plain Inkscape file. What I'm actually going to do is in my Inkscape, I'm going to import the actual image I exported from Tinkercad. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my downloads folder. And again, I'm not showing you my downloads folder because I don't need you all up in my business. This is my computer. So I don't need you all trying to figure out what my life is about. That's fine. You could just use your imagination that you're downloading something from your computer and keep it moving. So here I'm just going to go ahead and import an SVG file. Whoop. And I just pressed the wrong file, so I should have followed my own advice. And I'm going to show you guys in a minute. I just want to make sure everything's hunky-dory. So I'm importing. I'm waiting for it to import. Okie dokie. So I'm going to show you what I just did. So here in Inkscape, which is similar to Photoshop or Illustrator, I just imported the actual slices that I've had on my actual software. So now I'm going to rotate, and you can see here that my image is bigger than my actual workspace. And that's because I'm using a regular 8.5 by 11 sheet to be the actual outline for this, which means if it's 8.5 by 11, that means there's going to be some overhang because my actual image is 10 inches by 10 inches. But that's okay. I'm going to manipulate this. It won't be the exact size of the cupcake that I had in Tinkercad, but just to show you guys, I'm going to shrink it down so it fits a piece of paper. So here, I have all my slices on a piece of paper. Now you can tell this is the first cupcake we sliced. This is the second cupcake we sliced. The third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7th, 8th, 9th. Now, you can tell a couple of things in the slices. You see here why it's kind of tilted more towards the front. Remember what we actually did in Tinkercad when we actually tilted our toruses? So we had almost like a swirl going up this way. That's why when you look at this actual 2D slice in my Inkscape folder, you can actually see that tilt right there. And you can see once we move past the tilt, we have a clean cross section there and another clean cross section. And this one, pretty much a clean cross section, except for that little part here. So what we can actually do now is we can send this to a got ahead of myself. We can actually print this because we can save as a PDF file. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to save as a PDF. And when I save it as a PDF, I can call it Mbadika Tinkercad Cupcake 2D Slice. And once I save it as a PDF, I can send it to my home computer and actually print it and use it as a template in order to actually cut these shapes out of cardboard. And that's what we're going to do tomorrow. So what I want us to do for the remainder of the time today is I want us to practice turning our 3D design into 2D slices that we later send to a regular desktop printer, or just have as a template for us to cut out our shapes in cardboard in order to create our 3D design model of a cupcake from 2D slices back into 3D in reality. This is going to be how we test your skills of jumping from 2D to 3D. So show of hands, how are we feeling now that I've shown that? I just threw a lot at you. Raise your hand if you feel okay. Don't raise your hand if you're like, oh my God, this was so much information. I don't know how to handle it. So go ahead and show me on the actual participant side if you're feeling A-okay or was this a lot. And I'm going to go back into Tinkercad to showcase what the original slices look like. So before, this is what our actual 2D slices looked like. And now we're going to hop back into Tinkercad to show what our original slices looked like. So don't fear, don't fear, don't fear. So we have this version, and now we're going to move back to our Tinkercad and go back to the regular cupcakes as they were. So now that we see the actual cupcakes here from the top and from the front, we can now see how those slices were actually made. So what I'm going to do here is I want you to replicate the steps I just made during the remaining time. I'm going to have a little keynote over here, which is going to show you how I did it. So for example, I'm going to have cupcake 1. I shrunk down or had it go into the work plane, negative 0.25 inches. Cupcake 2, and I'm working from left to right, from the top row to the bottom row. Cupcake 2, I had to go down 0.5 inches. Cupcake 3, I had to go down negative 0.75 inches. Whoop, 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 whoop. You gotta also let me know when my actual typing, this is live, it's not going according to plan. So cupcake 4, went down -1 inch. Cupcake 5 will be going down -1.25 inches. And as you see, each time I was decreasing it, making it go further into the work plane, I was going down 0.25 inches. Cupcake 6, I had go down -1.5 inches because of going into the work plane, so it's going negative. Cupcake 7, I had go down 1.75 inches. Cupcake 8, I had go down 2.0 inches. And then last but certainly not least, Cupcake 9, I had go down 2.25 inches. Don't forget the negative because it has to go into the work plane. So this is your cheat sheet for how I did it. And don't forget that Cupcake 1 is here. Cupcake 2 is here. And this here is Cupcake 3. There we go. Oh no, it didn't do what I wanted it to do. No. Yes, don't feel you have to be perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm learning along with you this new environment. So I'm gonna go ahead and put Cupcake 2, Cupcake 3, Cupcake 4, Cupcake 5, Cupcake 6, you can barely see Cupcake 5, that's okay. Cupcake 7, Cupcake 8, and Cupcake 9. So now you can see cupcakes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and how deep into the work plane? That you need to go. If you have any questions while you're doing this on your own, feel free to ask me in the Q&A part of this. I'm going to leave this up for a couple of minutes. If you want to write it down, feel free to write it down on your scrap piece of paper. Use that as a reference as you're slowly going through and transforming your cupcake. If you're having any issues with the cupcake I made publicly available so you can follow along, I believe Miss Kellyanne just posted it in the actual chat room. So you can go ahead and import that cupcake using the actual import button here in Tinkercad, or you can just click Tinker this in order to actually manipulate that cupcake and do the same thing we just did here. So I'm just gonna be hanging back, just perfecting this and working on this a little bit. So simply let me know how you're feeling and simply let me know if you have any questions, but that's gonna be the first part of our project today. While you're tinkering, I'm going to give you a little sneak peek at your project tomorrow. We're going to have a special guest, YouTuber of Bite Size, Alex Davis is going to be joining us tomorrow, and she's going to explain why this skill is so important and how scientists and engineers are transforming 3D designs of food into 2D designs and then back into 3D designs like we did today in order to create 3D printed food. So all this is not because we're using this in order to understand the science behind 3D printed food. So feel free to do this project now and work on it throughout the evening if you need a little bit more time. So you're ready tomorrow at this time for our 3D printed food seminar, starting here 2:00 p.m. East Coast time and 11:00 a.m. West Coast time. But like I said before, I'll still be hanging back in order to answer your questions and let you know where the recordings are going to be, etc. So I'm gonna be here while you work on this. I don't know what that was, but you know, totally fine, totally fine. So yes. Oh, yes, I'm writing that right now where you can actually find our YouTube channel. So you can find us on YouTube under Mbadika, but because Mbadika isn't an easy thing to say, I'm going to go ahead and add it to the chat room, but it's Mbadika. And this is where you can actually find all the recordings of our Tinker Together webinar sessions. So in case you want to replay something, maybe you want to play it at a slower speed, or you want to do it step by step a little later and not so much in a live environment, you can find that there. You can also find our previous projects we've done using Tinkercad and Fusion 360 on our YouTube channel as well. So this is where you can find the webinars, additional STEAM related activities that we've done in the past. There's a couple of them that I personally enjoyed. For example, I showed you guys earlier this actual General Mayhem cutter that me and my nephews and nieces have been playing with in Play-Doh. And this is actually one of the projects on our YouTube channel. It was originally a cookie cutter we made in order to make General Mayhem from the Lego Movie 2 shortbread cookies. I absolutely love that project. One of the reasons I really love that project is because not only did we make shortbread cookies using these cookie cutters for ourselves, we actually made over 200 Lego Movie 2 General Mayhem shortbread cookies for Lego robotics participants throughout Boston as a special congratulations gift to them to inspire them to continue on their STEM journey. So this project holds a special place in my heart. And if you go to our YouTube channel, you can actually see how we brought this project to life and also our step-by-step guide on how we use Tinkercad and Fusion 360 in order to create this project, along with a step-by-step guide on Instructables. So that's kind of what that project's about. Okay, see a couple more questions. Is there a way to transfer this into Fusion 360? Yes, so if you don't feel this cupcake is realistic enough for you, you are always free to use the export, which is this button right here. Let me put a spotlight on my mouse. You can use the export button in order to download and 3D print your file and manually upload your STL or OBJ, which are the two file formats for 3D printing, and use those two file formats you export in order to upload it to some 3D printing design software. You can use it on Cura, you can use it on Dremel's 3D20 and 3D40 Digilab software. You can use it on a wide variety of 3D printing software. In addition, because we're in the Autodesk family right now, you can actually directly export your Tinkercad CAD models in order to render them, which is to make them look more realistic, over here. So as you can see, you can actually just take it directly to Fusion 360 by using this plugin. Or if you just want to flex and show off to your friends what you've been doing, you can go here to the picture of your design and click the download button in order to download an image of your design to share on social media. One of the reasons why I wanted to show you that in the Send To menu bar is that if you want my feedback on stuff, you can tell in the Zoom webinar that I actually can't see what you're designing because you're working from home, and I make sure that I blocked your webcam so I can actually see you. So what I would love for you all to do, if you feel comfortable, is that if you want feedback on your designs, feel free to reach out with parent permission if you need it. Onto your social media platforms, tag Mbadika and also do hashtag #TinkerTogether and post a screenshot or this screenshot right here onto your social media so I can actually give you feedback and be able to say, oh, this is what you did. Oh, this is what you could have did better, or this is what you could have did to improve upon it. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that to the actual text box, which is you can reach out to us on our social media, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find us at Mbadika, and don't forget to hashtag #TinkerTogether. Any other questions that folks may have for me in regards to this project? I know this is a lot. It's a lot to dive into, but trust me, the payoff that you'll see when you actually bring your 2D slices of your 3D designs to life will be well worth it. It's one of the things I find helps you understand how 3D design works. Because so often when we jump into Tinkercad, we're so used to whatever we drag over, we can send to a 3D printer and it's automatically going to be amazing. But to understand how CAD or computer-aided design software like Tinkercad works, you have to realize that it's taking all those slices, like you see here with our General Mayhem cookie cutter, and assembling them in such a way that you can create a 3D design from it. And that's why I personally love these projects. And for me, I don't want to call myself a foodie, like I'm a very picky eater, but when I like something, I really like it. And the fact that you can actually create or 3D print cupcakes is what some people are researching. Is just mind-boggling to me and just tickles my inner nerd and makes me all giddy. So this is a project and an actual special event tomorrow I'm really excited about, and I hope you're excited about, because I can't wait to actually share this with you all. So I'm going to give it about 5 more minutes for questions before we wrap up for today. If you have any additional questions, I'm always available on my social media, so feel free to ping us then. So I'm going to do the give you a few moments. I'm going to clean up my model. Just ask me in the Q&A. I also feel like that's a song that I am like horribly singing that I don't remember the actual lyrics to, but that's totally fine. So any questions, feel free to ask. I'm actually going to go ahead and correct a mistake that I made in regards to not having my work plane actually be the length of a piece of paper. That was something I could have done to make you and my life easier, but sometimes things just leave your brain when you're doing things live. So don't feel like you're under unique pressure. I mean, nobody's watching you. I can't see you. And even if I feel the pressure of doing live, trust me, I understand. So we think the width, we know the width of a piece of paper is 8.5 inches, and we know the length of that piece of paper is 11 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and update my grid, and I'm going to do a top view so I understand, okay, this is where my problem is. This is why I had to rotate it, but it's okay for right now. I'm just going to go ahead and go down to Snap Grid. If you don't know what Snap Grid is, it's a really helpful tool that tells you basically what is the actual width of each of these little squares. So if you don't know, when you move your actual 3D design model in Tinkercad, every time you click your actual arrows on your keyboard, you're moving it this distance. So whatever this number down here is, that's the distance you're moving it. You're moving it one exact square. I'm going to show you an example. So here, if I move it to the left, you see how I moved exactly one square? And I'm going to move it back to the right. It moves back to the right exactly one square. So if I feel my movements are too grand or too big, I can go here to Snap Grid, and I can actually make my movements 1/32 of an inch or smaller. So instead, every time I move it to the left, it's not let's call it 1/8 it was originally, is now 1/32 of an inch. So that way my movements are slightly smaller. And you see how it's 1, 2, 3, 4. It takes 4 hops to cross the same block as it did before. And so that's the kind of cheat that I like to use if I need to get all of my pieces kind of snuggle and close. And I know that my hand-eye coordination when it comes to my mouse is not going to let me get that close. I can use this tool so I can move right up to the edge when I'm trying to make everything fit on the work plane. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to make sure that I at least get one row all the way in without touching. And then another trick I'm going to do, once I have my middle row done, I'm going to click the actually I should ungroup that. Ungroup. What I'm going to do in order to make sure it's aligned, once Tinkercad stops messing with me. If you get these issues in which it takes a while for Tinkercad to actually catch up with what you're doing, it's probably your internet connection. So always give it a couple of seconds before you start becoming aggressive with the reload button, because that's how you lose work. And trust me, I've already had a couple people on these live webinars actually start to lose their work on here. So we don't want that to happen. So, you know, let's just take it easy. I'm going to take my time. I was a little too aggressive. I'm letting it go. I'm going to go to the left-hand side, undo my mistake, and I'm just going to sit here and be patient. Just going to sit here and be patient. Let me try again. Now I can click the top, middle, and bottom. I'm going to go to my align tool, and I'm going to align all of them down the middle. And I'm going to do the same thing for all of these. That way, when I'm cutting, when I actually export this to Inkscape and then print, or any other design software that you may have, you can even, I believe you can actually export an Svg file directly to Adobe Acrobat, which is a PDF reader. I've seen people do that. I will double check and make sure I give you all the right instructions. But you can actually do stuff like this and make sure everything's on your work plane as close as possible. Now I'm making sure everything is happy, happy, happy. I want to check on this side right here during the last minute. And yeah, see, I booted all of that off the work plane. This is why you check your angles. This is why you make sure your angles look good, because your camera over here on the left-hand side will have you thinking that all your shapes are on the work plane, and they're not on the work plane. So here, I'm gonna move this back to make sure it's as close as possible. I can tell I can move this a little bit over. I can also tell that my icing wasn't selected. And so these are the little tweaks that you're gonna need to do in order to make sure your cross sections are okay. So I'm on the last minute. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them in the Q&A or submit them via social media. But I hope you all had a great time, and I hope you enjoyed your time here. We'll be back here tomorrow with our special guest from Bite Size YouTube channel. But in the meanwhile, I hope you guys continue to build, make, learn, and don't forget to tinker together. See you later. Ciao. Boom.